Welcome to Divisive Issues, a foul-mouthed, spoiler-filled comic book podcast where we talk about comic books. I'm Sly.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Darryl.
We made it, guys.
It's been a while since we made it, actually.
Yeah.
I feel like.
So after Darryl made us revisit his childhood, now Sly has a suggestion for us.
Yes.
He's gone. See ya.
Bye, guys. I'm fuck you all. Sorry, got interrupted. Yeah, my suggestion was a comic book I read as a child, along with Dev Set. Like, this was in the same bargain bins that Dev Set was in, called the Maxx.
With 2 X's.
Yeah, 2 X's.
Yes.
The cover features a big purple guy with claws, and, you know, it looks like 90s edge shit.
The thing, like, it's hard to describe the guy because, like, the humans in this are like At first, I was almost reminded of like really old school, like Warcraft humans, where they're kind of their proportions are so messed up, like they're just so bulky, but their heads are like they're weird shapes.
Yeah, so
it's very stylized.
Let's talk about Sam Keefe. Sam Keefe, the artist. He's the writer. Yeah, the writer and creator of the series. Sam Keefe is an artist I have a lot of respect for. I think I like him better as... I want to say I like him better as a cover artist, but I do like his layouts a lot. He does a lot of interesting things with the layouts.
He also was the one who launched Sandman with Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, he launched Sandman with Neil Gaiman. If you read a lot of comics, or a decent amount of comics, there's a pretty decent chance you read some Sam Keefe stuff, because he wrote early stuff with Sandman. He drew a lot of Wolverine. He drew a lot of Batman in the 90s, and he drew the Maxx. And some people might know the Maxx because the Maxx was popular enough to have his own MTV cartoon.
Really?
Yeah. Along with Aeon Flux. It was premiered in that same block.
Also, Sam Keefe co-wrote the pilot for Cow and Chicken with his cousin who created the show.
Yeah.
Wow. See, I was going to say that the Maxx is like the art style in this is actually very 90s cartoony, whereas like Death's Head is like 90s like cool guy art. This is way more exaggerated and silly looking.
Oh man, am I thinking of the wrong thing? The Tick?
Yeah, no, it's very similar to the Tick.
Yeah, like it's really weird, but like you guys are saying, it's like a 90s cartoon, but with like some humans look like normal, and then some of them are like super exaggerated. Like
it's mainly the women that look normal because they have to be sexualized, whereas like all the men are either like weird, elongated, stick gaunt men, or they're like big fat. Yeah,
it reminds me a little bit of Chris Bocciolo's 90s art too.
Chris Botulism.
Yeah. Like in the Shade the Changing Man kind of stuff. It's a very like more out there 90s style, but I like it a lot.
I like it a lot too, but I do get why it will put people off. And honestly, as the series goes on, if you don't like it now, you're never gonna like it because it gets more abstract as it goes on. So people's heads.
But the thing is, for me, like the first issue turned me off when I first saw that. I'm like, this is like these guys look gross. But by the time I had finished the first issue and got into the second one, I started to appreciate how stylized it was. That it was like, especially they do cool things. I think with the art.
I agree.
Yeah,
I love the layouts.
Yeah, the layouts are where I was most like in love. Like especially just on the first page, how it's like the Maxx borders around this weird like bent, like one shape is what the text or the panel is, but it's like 20 different sides to it.
Yeah.
It also, they incorporate a lot of the words a lot. Like whenever they name characters, it's like part of the art. Like when they're like, this is Jimmy, and it is very cartoony, and it like pops up like almost like in a Scott Pilgrim kind of way.
Oh yeah,
but I loved it.
And also, the word bubbles also are stylized too for each characters, and like when stuff happens, one character.
Oh yeah.
When he gets injured, there's such the word bubble starts bleeding and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I really liked the way the villain and his lackeys looked. Like they're so really. You didn't?
No, I was gonna say the layout's like the only thing I kind of like about the comic. I was not impressed with the art.
It's funny because it reminds me of like what you would do if you were writing a 90s comic, which is how I always think of the Maxx. I guess you hate yourself, Darryl.
I like trying to go for more realism than expressionism.
But you do like cartoony characters mixed with like realism at points with like mind's existence and stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's one book I did.
Yeah, the one failure I made, says Darryl.
But I liked how like abstract and weird like the fights are, and like
Yeah, me too.
See, I couldn't follow the fights. Like, I feel like there was too much. I had to read into the panels too much. Like, you couldn't just figure everything out at a glance. You really had to, like...
Yeah, but Max
peer
can't
at
figure
it.
them out either. Like, he's like...
It's very like mixed up and warped the way Max perceives him, so I think it makes sense that a reader can't perceive him easily.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
I suppose.
Okay, let's
Wait.
talk about it. Let's get
Okay,
into
yeah.
it.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to be doing issues 1 through 4, and they're published by Image. This was like early Image, right?
Yeah, the newest reprinting of this is now by IDW. It's called Maximize. That's probably a trade. If you go try buy it, that's what you'll get now. That's by IDW when they reprinted it. One thing also to note is the one that wrote the scripts is William Mester Loebs. You know him better than I do, Ryan. Can you tell me
Yeah,
about him?
a lot of the like lore that people know about the Flash, like the Speed Force, kind of started under him a little bit, and we've talked about it in our Facebook group a little. He's the one that like had a Wonder Woman run where Artemis replaced her, and he got like she was just like super ripped and buff, and he's like a staple of the 90s. He's one of those comic book writers that I like a lot but doesn't get any credit ever.
Yeah.
So he
I actually
just
like
does
him.
the dialogue.
Yeah. He leaves around issue 20. The series goes for 35 issues, and he leaves around issue 20. I think this made me appreciate him a lot more, because I think when Sam Keefe writes it by himself, the dialogue gets way too exposition-y.
There's actually an issue by Alan Moore first.
Yeah, let's say there's an issue by Alan Moore as well.
So one of the things that I think makes this stand out a little in like the scope of Image in the 90s is Image was very like creator controlled, but a lot of it was just like Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, super muscle blood people.
Yeah.
And this is definitely more interesting than most of Image at the time.
So the story opens up, issue 1. The Maxx is a hobo. He's living in a box. Outside his box in his alleyway, a woman gets dropped off by a taxi. Basically it's a setup. The taxi drops in the wrong place, and 2 guys are waiting to beat her up and mug her.
And possibly rape her, because that's
Yeah,
going to be a repeating theme throughout
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
story.
but it's like a specific villain is the big rapist, right?
Yeah.
It's not like everyone. I guess.
Well, I mean,
guess
they mention other people
Yeah.
just getting raped, too.
Yeah, it's true.
So one of the coins from her purse drops near Max's box, and the smaller thug tries to get it, and Max pulls him inside the box, kills him.
And does the cartoony thing where when he pulls him, all that's left is his scarf, like, floating in air.
Yeah.
Whoop!
So Max is then going to go and take the other guy on, but then the police interrupt and tell them both to freeze, and they take Max and the big guy Fridge into with their police car and leave the woman behind.
What's pretty funny is like the whole beginning of the story. It's narrating in Max's head, and he's like saying like, you know, sometimes this happens in the alleys, and then sometimes I'm there to save them, and then the police are like, sometimes we're here too, and he's like, I've been saying this out loud.
Yeah, there's a running joke that he keeps talking. He's making dramatic, like superhero dialogue. I'm going here to save the world, and people realize he's saying it out loud.
Even though it's super like cheesy, I kind of really like the narration here, because he's like, sometimes people are saved by fate, sometimes they're saved by chance, and sometimes they're saved by me. And then like it's like this dramatic like superhero dialogue, but then they like make a joke out of it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's like a big theme in this is like it's an inversion of a lot of the typical superhero stuff. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think it is.
It is.
I mean, they make fun of the fact that he thinks he's a hero all the time. Because
Is that a subversion, though?
It is a subversion. The whole joke is that he's supposed to be this heroic guy. He's a bum living on the streets who's a loser no one likes,
I mean, he still does a lot of heroic things and protects people, and it's just like he's not getting recognized for it. It's not like he's making it worse by trying to help.
Or is he? Or is he just a crazy man who is just crazy?
he thinks he's in Australia half the time.
Yeah, like-
fighting.
It is an inversion. Darryl, it is an inversion. I'm sorry you don't like this book, but it is an inversion. Like I will get into it later, but Sam Keefe completely abandons the superhero concept halfway because it's such an inversion of the fucking...
Oh, so I need to read volume 2, didn't I?
No, but you don't have to read it, but like, I'll just say this right now. After like the first 10 issues, Max is not the main character at all anymore. Like he stops being the main character, and like
But-
by issue 20, he's completely gone. Like
But in Darryl's defense, we're not talking about those. We're talking.
I know,
about
but I'm saying like he's saying like, oh, I know there's an inversion. It is a fucking inversion. Like fuck you, Darryl. Like you're wrong. You're just wrong. You're just flat wrong.
Why?
Okay, the 4 issues I read, I wasn't getting a lot of subversion.
It is a
aspects
subversion.
from
He's
it.
a fucking hobo living on the streets. Whatever. But
I think it's fair to say that it's a lot because the narrative is confusing, as we're gonna see in this next scene. I think it is fair to say that even if he's subverting tropes, sometimes it's not as clear if he's actually subverting them or just winking about them.
okay,
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
The police have arrested Maxx and the big guy Fridge, and the woman got left behind. The police didn't notice her, and she awakens to see a mysterious cloaked figure that rapes and kills her. So there's the first rape.
Yeah,
First rape of
and
like 20.
it's she gets taken on the same panel that it's got the joke of like sometimes it's us that save him and Maxx gets arrested.
Yeah.
So that you already got like a nice like contradictory kind of elements going on of like haha superhero funnyism and also a woman getting raped and killed.
Yeah.
This world is
fucked
really fucked up. Like in general, like it's like one of those things that I always criticize in these things where it's like every other person. I mean, and I think they make fun of that too. That everyone carries knives everywhere they go because they're like, well, people get raped and killed all the time, so you got to protect yourself. Like everyone is constantly getting carjacked, and like it's like a really crazy '90s dystopia.
The thing that's interesting is after our Crossed episode, I keep getting into fights with people about cynicism. I don't know why. But like for me, it is such a thin line that like when we talk about a lot of Edge books, like it's the tone of it, because like this is also really brutal and depressing at times, but there's just something about it that I was drawn into and not totally repulsed.
Yeah, same.
It's got a lighter tone, I think. Like I think the jokes do help alleviate that it's, you know, everyone tries to make jokes, so it's like people are trying to be optimistic in a cynical world rather than Cross where it's like everyone's like I'm going to die and get like stabbed. And
Mark Millar's like, no, this is life, this is how you live. Whereas these books are like, isn't this crazy? Like, there's a big difference in the presentation of it.
And also, one of the reasons, not to get over analytical, but the reason, one of the tropes is that Max's life is shit, and he runs into this fantasy world in the Outback to escape this shitty world he lives in. So the world has to be shitty for him to want to escape it. He has to be a fucking loser.
That's true.
And
so speaking of which, what is this Australian Outback thing that we keep talking about?
Yeah, so while he's in the police car, there's an interesting thing where they have this chunk sound effect in the background of some panels, and that's Max's head going crazy with a headache. And he passes out periodically, and he ends up in a dream where he's in the Australian Outback, fighting white hands coming out of the ground.
They're like the those bosses in the Shadow Temple in Ocarina of Time. There's like these just white arms that come out and grab him, and it's really creepy.
Yeah, beautiful. There's a beautiful woman nearby called Leper Queen, and Maxx, watching her, he gets courage to fight, and he wants to become her hero. So he starts fighting off the white hands, and then we cut from the Leper Queen, the woman, to a woman that looks like her called Julie Winters, and she's a freelance social worker, and she's with a client who says that I've never been with a social worker like you, one who just like a hooker. And Julie's like, oh, thanks for the input. Kicks him out and says, at least I have a job and more than a fucking vomit stained blanket like you do. So fuck off.
She's wearing like a frilly tube top, like assless chaps with fishnet like shorts.
Yeah,
black underwear. You can clearly
She looks
see.
like a hooker.
She looks like a hooker, yes. So Julie gets called to bail Maxx out.
Apparently what she does is she's a social worker who like runs her clinic out of her apartment, and she like bails people out of jail with the intention of like helping them through social work. So she like bails people out and then takes them on as clients. And throughout the story we see her like trying to like negotiate on behalf of tenants so she could pay their rent in the apartment building, and like she seems to be really like, you know, she seems to really care about these victims of society, which is counter to how she talks about them, which I think Sly's about to get into.
Yeah, so at the police station, they start. A cop is like, "Oh, it's a dangerous neighborhood," and she tells the cop, "You don't act stupid, you don't get raped." And that's kind of a recurring thing of Julie. She talks about she's sick of the victim mentality of rape victims.
The thing that's really interesting about this, though, is when I first started reading this, I was like, "Oh, that's weird that they're like." She's constantly victim blaming, but every time she does, there's another character that argues with her about it. So I couldn't really tell which side Sam Keith was on.
I think he was, having read the whole thing and like thinking about it some more, because at first I was like that too, where I was like, this is really weird that it's victim blaming, but they always have someone to argue against it, or they try and look into it's like, why are you victim blaming it? And it clearly falls on the don't victim blame side.
Especially because she is inside not feeling that way. They reference the fact that she's fighting with herself.
Yeah, but that's like more later on they do.
Yeah,
at the beginning,
right.
I was like, it was really unexpected when he was like, oh, you're just gonna victim blame, and she's like this liberal culture that just like no one takes responsibility for their own lives. And it's very rare that we read a book, especially on this show, that actually has characters argue about politics and doesn't have the book take a stand immediately up front.
Oh, so like it's like milquetoast centrist piece of shit then.
It is important to be subtle, but here, like, you don't read a lot of comics, or I haven't read a lot of comics about victim blaming and rape. Yeah, so it would have been like, I feel like it would have been nicer for it to make more of a solid stand, because it really doesn't push you hard against the victim blaming mentality. It's just like,
it kind of does showing how all the victims being brutalized and tortured.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to. By presenting the discourse and then going through this shitty world, like, I feel like, how could anyone go through this and be like, yeah, they shouldn't have been wearing that? Like, I don't think anyone would.
And at the same time, too, especially at this point, this is what, the early 90s? I feel like victim blaming mentality and like really dissecting that, I don't remember talking about that until like a few years ago.
Yeah.
And like, maybe this book would be less subtle nowadays, but I found it really, really interesting that they were having this conversation in an early 90s image book.
Yeah. I don't know if we're getting to it, but this book shaped, which is why I always insist on not judging by book by its cover, and why I like finding like messages like this in weird places, because this is how I got introduced to all this material as a kid. Like, I read this when I was like, the same time I read Death Cell was like when I was 8 years old. So like, which I shouldn't have been reading this book, but like, like we talked about, like, this is when we talk about like the diversity episode, like, this isn't as poignant as Virginia Woolf. And sure, the comics are never going to be as poignant as Virginia Woolf, but like, this is how people get introduced to it. And this is why I became such a strong feminist, because like I read stuff like this and made me really think about it at like 8 years old, like how fucked up shit like this is. She victim blames, and she gets mad at Maxx for trying to always save these people from being raped, kind of portraying Maxx like a white knight asshole, like what the alt-right usually call people, white knights. And two teens, Gloria and Tommy, are in laundromat waiting for their clothes to dry. Gloria showing off her knife that her dad gave her for protection.
So this is what Phil was talking about. She has this like comically large like safari knife.
Yeah. Tommy gets frisky, and Gloria angrily sends him off to go get some coke, saying, "Oh, go cool off, get some cokes for us." And the figure that raped and killed a previous woman shows up to rape
and
Gloria,
kill her. Yeah,
or
not kill her. Yeah, he doesn't.
She becomes a main character later on, by the way.
And even this, the guy, as he walks away to get the cokes, he's like, if she expects me to keep getting cokes, we better go steady. And it's like, this guy is portrayed like as a jerk complaining about the friend zone. And again, that seems like way ahead of its time to me.
Yeah.
Was it portraying him as a jerk, or was he?
Yeah,
because
he's like, oh, if we're going steady, I should get up to frisk you. Like, he's a jerk.
I mean, they act like boyfriend and girlfriend, and he's bringing up the question of like, is that fair that I have to be her boyfriend and buy her things as if I'm her boyfriend, but I don't even get to do anything else?
Yeah, she says stuff like he's a sweet doof. So from her perspective, we're knowing that this guy has good intentions.
Which a lot of people in the friend zone.
I mean, yeah, like the nice guy problem.
Yeah,
it's just to me, it's not like, it's not condemning nice guys. It's just showing that they have that kind of relationship. But like, I think you're putting that on their relationship.
Yeah, I guess. Just the thing that stood out to me is like she didn't like flirtatiously be like, "Oh, go cool down, go get." She was like, "Get the hell off of me! I don't want you touching me right now." And I thought that was really, really interesting, especially how sexualized all the female characters have been up to this point. Yeah, that I was like, I didn't expect that. Yeah. From this.
So Julie, throughout the whole story, Julie has been getting phone calls from some creep, and Maxx goes to check out who it is while she has the guy on the line, because it seems to be coming from a nearby store. Maxx finds the guy and starts chasing him, and it's not a guy. It's a black version of one of the things from the Outback. It's like a little ball creature with sharp teeth called an Iz.
That was a robot at first.
Everything's a robot to Darryl.
Yeah. It's hard to describe them. They're like really cartoony looking, like little, like little black balls with hands and feet.
Yeah,
they look kind of like Nibbler if he didn't have a face or a like stomach from Futurama. Like,
imagine Black Pac-Man, kind of.
Yeah.
So Maxx chases a guy to a gas station rooftop, and he meets the cloaked figure. The cloaked figure calls him Brer Lapin, and he notices Max doesn't seem to remember anything from his past, and says like, "Oh, I hate killing amnesiacs," and that's
because Max seems to just forget things all the time.
Yeah,
It's also his origin is that he like put on the mask and he can't remember who he was before he did. All he knows is he put on a mask and became the Maxx.
Yeah. And this is Max's first story, right?
there was like a preview in Wizard. By the way, Wizard really hyped this up at a time. Like if anyone read Wizard, you might know this comic as well. Wizard magazine.
So issue 2, we start back at Julie Winter's house, and she's weighing herself, and the narration bubble is talking about how she's upset that she's still not as thin as she wants to be. And she opens up the fridge, and then she gets grabbed by one of the black goo guys, the Isses. And then it cuts to a guy driving to the gas station where Maxx and this guy are fighting, and it's about how this guy's narrating that he wishes something interesting would happen to him to shake up his life.
It's comical again though, because it's the guy who was with Gloria who got raped, and he's like, that was crazy that happened to her, but like nothing ever cool happens to me.
Is it the same guy?
Yeah, I think it is, right?
This guy's bald though.
It's a guy from the same class, but it's not. Tommy.
Because I was trying to think about why he would be. Yeah. See, this is another problem again with the art where you could make it more distinct if you're like, this is this guy, where it's like
Tommy has hair.
He's bald, and Phil still thought it was the same dude.
I didn't read it today. I read it a few days ago, so
I didn't read it at all.
Tommy is bald and wears a fucking football jersey. This guy, Tommy is not bald. Tommy has blonde hair. This guy's bald and he's wearing a jacket. I think it's.
I guess I'm a fucking asshole.
Anyway, it makes another good like anti-victim blaming thing where he's talking about how Gloria had like these burn marks on her wrists and that she can't talk well anymore, and he says they think they can save her fingers. My dad says it happened because she was a tramp, but I don't think so. Things just happen is all, but not to me.
I mean, everything's boring in my life. He's basically angsty emo kid.
Yep.
Somebody kill me.
Like Maxx and this guy that he's fighting fall through.
The guy's name is Mr. Gone, like he reveals it.
Yeah, Mr. Gone. They fall through on top of his car, and then they start fighting. And
there's all these Isses everywhere that to the guy look like old grandmas that all have the exact same face.
Yeah.
But to Maxx and us, they're like those black goo things, but with like granny clothes on.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Isses look like whatever they like could shapeshift or whatever.
Whatever you're wearing, whatever they're wearing, they look like.
Yeah. To regular people that don't know about the dream world, there's like a thing they explain. I don't remember to explain here, but they explain like people who aren't aware of the Australian outback world, and that's Mr. Gone's aware of it too. He's aware of the Australian outback world. People who are not aware of it see the Isses as whatever they're dressed at, but only Maxx and people who know about the Australian outback see them as the creatures from the outback.
Mm-hmm.
So as they're fighting, Mr. Gone pulls out a gun, and he like reaches his hand through a window and pulls out a girl from the back seat.
Yeah.
And keeps her as a hostage. Is like, you have to surrender or I'll add her to my score. And then Maxx punches her in the face.
Yeah, he scratches her head.
And flat. I was trying to figure out if that was an its or not, or if he literally just killed someone for like a joke.
Well, they reveal next panel that the guy says, "Oh, well, it was really cool. Really cool that you knew that was a CPR dummy." And the guy's like, "Maxx, like, oh yeah, of course I know the CPR dummy."
Oh, okay. Thank you, because I read that as car dummy. I was like,
the guy says he's a CPR student, and then the CPR dummy, I think, it was set up and delivered.
One thing that I think is relevant here, that Darryl read it as car dummy, is the lettering sometimes is really, really cool and interesting. Like you said, when things are bleeding, and all the eyes are exclamation points, and like, I found it had a lot of personality and was fun, but there were times that like I could not read what they were.
Mr. Gone especially, his text is hard to read.
His eyes become exclamation points and his O's have little lines under them.
When he talked about the Isses, I thought he was calling them ISIS, and I was really like, what?
Yeah, this is a very problematic comic.
Prophecy.
Yeah, the prophecy.
Prophecy of ISIS has been built for years.
Anyway, Mr. Gone runs off, and then Maxx is left fighting Isses, and he falls into like a dumpster.
It's also interesting that Mr. Gone says to him, like, this world isn't real, right? The only real world is the Australian outback world. And it's like, for at least for these 4 issues, I couldn't tell if Maxx was just dreaming up this Australia place, or if they were dreaming this real, like this modern urban city, Like, obviously the comic mostly takes place in this modern urban thing, so I figured that was real, but Mr. Gone's constantly telling him, like, none of this is real.
Yeah, he says Australian outback is real, and this fucking dystopia world is a nightmare world.
And because everyone's so shitty.
Yeah, so what happens is it cuts to Max, like, he sees this girl sitting on a stage in the Outback world, and she's talking about that...
He passes out and goes back in the Outback.
Yeah, there's this bad doll that keeps telling her things she doesn't want to hear, and if it keeps talking,
she's going again, but now she's twisted and, like, disturbed looking.
Yeah, she's gonna brush its hair out if it keeps talking.
Yeah.
So then it jumps to Mr. Gone being silly in the bathtub blowing bubbles, and using a like cow's butt in a wall for like out of the butthole comes soap, out of the udders comes water.
Yeah.
It was weird.
I actually was like, this is the one part where I'm like, this is kind of funny. Although it's also really weird because this guy's a rapist and murderer, and it's like so kind of lighthearted.
And the cartoony looking Izzes are like shit, like bathing him.
Yeah.
Like it's like it is pretty weird.
Yeah, and then the whole time he's talking to Julie, it's because she's in the back room and she's strung up with like this
like it's like sexy ballerina outfit.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it. And so then they start getting into a discussion about how she's saying that he clearly has a problem with women with everything he's doing, and that
he's trying to like act out sexual fantasies with her. And first she's like, "Oh, I'm really flawed. Like I'm not as skinny as I seem."
I didn't like this because she's like, "I'm pretty flawed. I have like a fat stomach and chafe marks where my jeans cut, and bad breath from eating the wrong stuff, and I'm like stubbly under my arms." And
Darryl, keep in mind, this is the 90s when everyone would look the same.
Well, no, I took this as her, like, because she's constantly being like, people don't own up to anything, people don't up to anything, because now she's in a situation where she is, like, held captive, her first response is to blame herself for it.
Also, this was the first comic I ever read, first anything I ever read, where any woman character had any body image issues. Like,
yeah.
Like,
okay.
You think like, oh, she still looks pretty overall. All women that are pretty don't think they look pretty, by the way. So.
It's not that.
Also, I think also the fact that she's saying this stuff is in reference to the fact that she's accusing him of having this like fucked up image of like the some people do this, like they build up this perfect woman that can't exist in their mind, and then they're like trying to find that, and when they don't, they get angry. Yeah. But it's like she's accusing him of saying, you want me to be this like scared ballerina who you can enact sexual fantasies on, but like that image, that idea doesn't exist. Like that perfect woman in your mind doesn't exist. I'm a real person and real people have problems, you know?
And in trend, Mr. Gone accuses her of being a shitty feminist. Because she dropped out of school, she's working freelance as a social worker. She basically made a mess of her life.
He references that she parrots a lot of Camille Paglia.
Yeah. They reference a lot of her.
Because she's the big one that's like, women like get what they deserve kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then she says, it's not my fault, you broke into my locked house and kidnapped me. You're twisted, you can't blame it on me, or you're just trying to find ways to blame it on me. And then he explains that he knows more about her than she realizes, about like the spirit animal.
Doesn't he say, like, I know all about you, I've been stalking you for Christ's sake?
Yeah.
Or something like that.
And again, though, but what's empowering for her, I think through this, while they're having this back and forth, she's also taking action and immediately looks for a knife to try to start cutting herself free while she's talking to him. Like, I thought she was pretty badass during this, because she's like, she finds a tooth of one of the and is like arguing with this serial rapist and like cutting herself loose the whole time.
Yeah, she's just talking to get him be distracted while she's getting ready to stab him in the neck, which is what she does.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens here when she cuts Mr. Gone in the neck? There's a parallel with the Australian outback with with the Maxx watching the Leper Queen, and that's the whole point. Is she stabs him before he can tell the truth, while the Leper Queen's saying, "If this doll doesn't shut up, I'm gonna brush his head off." And Leper Queen does it while she stabs Mr. Gone in the neck. She doesn't want to find out the truth, so she stabs Mr. Gone to get him to shut up and not tell her about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then
at first I was confused because I thought this was like a voodoo doll kind of thing, or like she was controlling her. It's just a parallel. That's it.
It's just what the Leper Queen is hurt in herself, as they reveal later on.
Oh, that makes sense.
I was trying to like piece that together too. I'm like, obviously the Leper Queen is Julie, but like which world exists in
which
reality.
one's the real Julie?
That makes sense.
And then the Maxx escapes from the dumpster, ready to track down Mr. Gone, setting up issue 3.
Yeah,
but I thought that was cool. Like this whole issue, like the final climactic moment, like Maxx is just in the dumpster. She like fucking stabs him in the neck.
Yeah. I thought issue 2 was cool. Darryl, you're less convinced.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so issue 3. So it starts with Maxx following an to lead him to Mr. Gone, but he still keeps shifting back and forth between the Australia fantasy, and then he when he wakes up, he forgets why he's even following the So obviously I'm glad that Julie is the one who's leading this charge of defeating him, because Maxx is kind of an idiot.
I thought this was a cool scene too, because he's pushing through all the crowds of people, and then he just is in like a field of grass.
Yeah, basically, like I said, there's parallels between the Outback and the real world. While Maxx is fighting through crowds of people in the real world, he's fighting through tall grass in the real world. And he's saying what am I doing? I thought I was in a safe field, but I'm back in the Outback. The whole time he's confused.
Mm-hmm. So he ends up, after fighting an army of he lands in a bathroom that's like the mirror image of Mr. Gone's bathroom with the cow buttholes or whatever that Darryl was talking about. And he has a flash of that doll from earlier saying "mommy," and then Mr. Gone shows up in a tiki mask. The two fight, but Gone says that they should stop because he says Maxx and Julie are soul linked and he is her protector. And that's why Maxx saw that mommy vision, because Julie is the real, the leopard queen. And she's lost in the city of her own mind. And so basically Julie why did she create this world? She had a trauma or something?
We don't know.
They suggest that they say I think it's pretty...
it's pretty strongly suggested that she was
raped.
Yeah.
Yeah, she says somebody hurt her, doesn't matter who, but after that she escaped within herself, and now she's lost within her own
that's why she's a social worker, because she's trying to protect herself and have control over other people by telling them what's wrong with their lives and what she should do.
Yeah, and Mr. Gone says that they created this world where she could be strong. And that's one of the reasons why she's her politics are stop victim blaming, all that stuff, because she wants to be the strongest possible. So
because she herself is kind of a victim and she blames herself because of it.
And then Mr. Gone says that the thing that we've been viewing as the Australian Outback is actually Pangea in the real world, and the world we're now is the fantasy where everyone is acting out their deepest fantasy. So we're in Julie's world.
Yeah, but when I was I definitely got that, but when I was reading this, I'm but he's a fucking villain. Is he telling the truth?
Yeah, that's another thing. Mr. Gone is a villain, and on top of all the fucking visions, that's the one thing I love about this comic. I still love about it is you never know what's the truth and what isn't.
Well, even Maxx points that out, where he's I don't even know to trust him, least of all about Julie, the person he's been stalking.
Yeah, he says Maxx recaps all this stuff in an easier to digest way, but then he says, but that's all coming from the villain. So don't villains lie? He's very confused by this as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting concept, because comics always have the villain explain their plan, and having someone be what if he's just full of shit? I think is really cool. That's a subversion, Darryl.
Yeah.
So then, since Julie's now saved because she saved herself, her and Maxx are sitting on a dock, and he's clipping her toenails, which it just looks really weird because he's
especially
this giant
because
monster.
She is normal looking, and he is a
giant purple man.
Yeah, and he's holding the clippers.
We need to point out too, he has the most ridiculous overbite too.
Oh yeah, he actually doesn't look like he has a lower jaw at all.
Not only is it a big overbite, they reveal later on that whenever somebody tries to take out the mask, somebody tries to take off the Max's mask, the mask of the Maxx, bites their fingers off.
Oh, and they actually said that at the beginning when the cops tried to arrest him. Julie's "Why'd you bite off someone's fingers?" And he's "I didn't." It was that was the mask. And also, I should have mentioned the cops were in on that thing too. Didn't they mention being?
Yeah, because they didn't arrest Fridge. They just arrested Maxx.
Yeah,
and they said they couldn't bring him to jail because he didn't murder anybody, but they knew those muggers by name.
They did. Yeah, they knew them. They're "Oh, those guys."
Yeah.
So this is a really fucked up dystopia.
Yeah.
And also about the tail clipping scene. It's goofy, but that's one of the most iconic scenes in the whole entire series.
Really?
The final.
I can see why.
The final scene of them together is an homage to this scene. It's my favorite scene from the finale.
Yeah, so basically he's asking are we already at the stage in our relationship where we could clip each other's toenails? I don't ever want to be at that stage of a relationship with anybody personally, especially because she bites the nail off. but
yeah, she bites her nails off.
whatever. So basically she repeats that like she doesn't want Maxx to feel bad for her or anything that has happened because she's sick of professional victims, like rape victims always crying about what happens. She complains about like the modern liberal, they use as an excuse for everything in their life. And while she's going on this tangent, Maxx is thinking about what Gon told him and said, like, did she create this world? You know, is she just hiding from the truth? And he's telling her about the, you know, the rape victims that were left for dead. And she says that she became a social worker. Well, this is when...
She just says that, what she says is that I'm sick of people always trying to get sympathy, and she's sick of the Maxx always trying to make excuses for them and stuff like that. But while she's saying that, the Maxx is in her monologue, remembering what Mr. Gon said before the Maxx left him.
Yeah,
and
that she built the social worker, to smother her pain and controlling others, and that she built a wall around her better self. So, like, this is, like, just the strong side of her. You know, I use the term loosely.
And while they're talking, the parallel to the other world is the leper queen inside a giant building, boarded up and crying.
Yeah,
and as Julia, that's what I was gonna say. She's crying as this is going on.
And Julie says, like, "Oh, don't worry about Maxx. I'm gonna be just fine." As the leper queen is crying inside.
Yeah, but she's the way Maxx is holding her. Like, only we can see that she's crying. So I took it as like, you know, she's like, it's not like she's opening up to him.
No,
just bottling
real
it
world
off.
Julie's not crying at all. It's only leper queen.
Yeah,
the leper queen's crying.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And,
it's like one of those things that like she's just putting on a facade, and we are supposed to know that.
Yeah, and that's issue 3. And at this point, I still was like, this book's okay, but looking back, I think I like this a lot.
I think I liked it a lot when I was reading it.
So let's get into issue 4, which everyone seemed to like.
So issue 4 takes a very different. It's very different. The narrator for this one is not Maxx or Julie or Mr. Gon. It's a little girl named Sarah. I mean, not
Teenage girl. Not like,
teenage girl. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And she wants to be a writer. She says that, and she is hanging out under an overpass because she's like, writers do that kind of stuff to get experience, which I thought was pretty funny. And then she meets Maxx.
By the way, I love all the jokes they make about being a writer. Like, oh, a writer, did I shock you? A writer's supposed to shock you and stuff like that. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
That's that throughout this whole issue. She's always, because she's narrating to us directly. And so she finds Maxx under the overpass because he's a bum. And Maxx tells her that he knows her dad. So she's like, well, I guess I can talk to him. And we find out that his dad, or her dad, was a barber. And one day he went into a shop, shot everyone there, and then shot himself.
Did you guess who her dad is?
Mr. Gon.
Yes. I didn't get it the first time I read it.
didn't realize that.
Yeah. If you look at the image of when where it says dad, it's like the same type of head with a bullet in his head, but also his head is ripped off like the doll was.
That makes sense.
I didn't know if it was just like expressive because of, I don't know, the artist style.
Yeah.
And that he looked kind of like Mr. Gon because of the artist style.
I took it that way too, but that's cool.
It's funny because Sam Keefe said, like, Mr. Gon looks like one of his previous characters, one of his previous comics, and he says, all I can draw is Mr. Gon.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And then as she's introducing like her family life and everything, after the dad dies, her mom becomes like a super hippie. I mean, like
groovy.
She's always like, yeah.
Peace,
Did you catch any bad vibes today? How's school, Trippy? And she was like, my mom was never like this before, but she basically is like a hippie now afterwards. But she's still like a really angry person, and she like starts yelling at her and says like, you don't want to end up like your dad. And then she's like, oh,
she's like hippie, but like she still talks about like, don't end up like your dad. Like, and she's very clearly like worried about Sarah, and she gets pissed off when she shows any sign of being disturbed.
Yeah, and my favorite part is that the mom says, like, tell me I'm not a bad mother, tell me I didn't ruin your life. And she says, you didn't ruin my life, Mom. And Sarah remarks how that she has to mother her own mother over this.
I
like
loved this a lot.
And how like the mom lost the dad, and then as a result she lost her mom because she's not her mom anymore. She's basically like you said, she has to be mothered.
I mean, even the mom says like, oh, we could be like sisters, let's talk about the prom. And she's like, I wanted a mom, but this is what I got.
Yeah. And so we go to her school, and she has a friend, or not a kind of a friend named Jimmy, who's like a loser, but he at least gets to beat up kids even younger than him. And she's like, that's kind of cool because it shows like the food chain where even if you're always bullied. At least you can bully someone else.
Mm-hmm. This kid Jimmy wears like green sunglasses, a bandana, and like a cigarette in his mouth. So he's like
he looks like a little shitty Duke Nukem.
Oh my god, he does.
That's when I saw him. I'm like, oh, okay, he's like nerdy bullied Duke Nukem.
That's what probably Duke Nukem type would be like in real life.
Probably. And so he told her a story where she thinks this is really cool, that he got carjacked by a bunch of guys in their underwear. And in his version of the story, while she's telling us what he said about how he kicked their asses, we see in the image him tripping out of the car, almost dying, and Maxx actually coming and saving him. But in his telling of the story, which she is telling us, he actually, was so cool he broke one of their skulls or something. But actually it was Maxx smashing their head into the car. And it turns out that Sarah actually visits Julie for like social work. And it turns out that the mom and Julie are actually friends. And Sarah tells her, they have an argument, and Sarah tells Julie, like, oh, I found one of my dad's guns, and it's pretty cool, but she doesn't say she's carrying it right now. But Sarah tells us.
Oh, something we need to point out now that I'm looking at the Sarah and Julie stuff is that Sarah isn't actually drawn like a hot chick like almost every other girl in this book is.
Oh,
she's kind of like a beatnik with a cap on and this really long frizzy hair that covers a lot of her body, and she's
super frizzy.
She wears a lot of like frumpy, baggy clothing.
A lot of times you actually don't see her; you see a silhouette with just like big frizzy, like a big frizzy outline.
Yeah, and the glasses are reflective of like just her yeah
And then Sarah's mom shows up and starts arguing with Julie, and it's like an argument about feminism, and they're yelling like Steinem, like Gloria Steinem, and Palia, and misogyny and liberalism and humorless totalitarianism. They just start arguing about feminism.
One thing I like is that Sarah was like, if they're arguing so much, why are we always friends? I don't like it because it feels like very real. Like, reminds me of me and Phil. Like, you hear us talk about capitalism or communism, like, why are they friends? Like, I find it interesting that they have a relationship like that.
I could definitely see that being like an outcast, like a high school outcast. I could see why adults always arguing like politics you would say like, well, why are they friends? But like that's literally our other podcast.
Yeah, people do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so she asks, or I don't know who asks, but Jimmy and Sarah go to the prom together, and it doesn't exactly show what happens, but I
love the way this is shown because the main panel is it's like an empty auditorium with Sarah sitting by herself, and it looks like broken shards of glass that are superimposed over the auditorium, where it's like them together, like smiling, them kissing, and then him pulling away and her crying while the whole school laughs at her. And she's like, it doesn't even hurt. It doesn't matter.
It's really stylized. Like it looks like a bad dream, like a trippy dream, in these pieces of glass.
Yeah. What did you think about this, Darryl?
I didn't like it. It's too hard to tell what's happening. It's not clear.
I don't think it's supposed to tell. I think it's
it's abstract.
But I'm saying it's too abstract to be like to the point where it's like, all right, something bad happened. Then why even include those if like you're not going to be able to read?
All the information it shows, all the information you need. You see everyone laughing at her. You see her crying. If they show more detail,
and you know it was Jimmy's fault because right to the left of it's him with this like in the darkness having this like
it's like that. That's
grin.
fine. I like that. It's just like the red. It's not even like shattered glass. It's kind of like goopy looking. It's too weird.
See, I loved it, but
so anyway, this he obviously fucked with her somehow, and he says like, hey, I had to do it. It's my only chance to be cool at the school.
And he even says like, I know it's fucked up to sacrifice you for everybody else, but like, you're gonna tell me you wouldn't? And she says, I would.
Yeah,
he says I can't help it. Besides, we were just having a laugh, right? Nobody really got hurt.
And you have like the silhouette of her in the back, and she does say in her own mind, like, I wasn't lying. I wasn't mad because I would have done the same thing in that same situation. Like and she says here, it's important for a writer to know that she has the potential to be as rotten as everybody else.
I also like the scene too because like how she begins describing it as like, it didn't get to me, it's just like people laughing. Nobody was really hurting me. but that this is like kind of a cruel way that kids do torture each other is through just finding humor in each other's like faults and terrible things that happen. Like, nobody's getting into physical altercations over this, but at the same time, like, this is really, like, crushing her on the inside, and she has to act like it's nothing, or otherwise she plays into, like, the ridicule.
Yeah.
I've seen the scene a million times of, like, the kid in high school that's led on to a date and is, like, totally pranked or whatever, but I don't know if I've ever seen it where the kid immediately admits, I would have done the same thing.
It's also, I feel like this is a lot... or somewhat different here is because these two were the outcasts, and this usually or like, I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking of movies too much where I'm like, this person's too attractive to be an outcast.
Yeah. Oh no, that's the thing. Or like, it's like the popular girl invites the nerdy kid who's bullied to the dance, and obviously it's a prank. But here it's like
he says, I'm the shortest kid in the school. This was my only chance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he even says, like, we needed each other, but now that I did this, I don't need you anymore. Sorry.
And during that scene too, she thinks about having, like, how she has her gun in her pocket, and I was like, is she gonna fucking kill him? But she doesn't.
And she also says, like, that's foreshadowing. That's what a good writer does, foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you mention, you might have mentioned this before, but I don't remember, about how when she's talking to Julie about the gun, she says she really liked to touch it because it felt like it made her closer to her dad.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't.
And that's something they still talk about. She wants to be closer to her dad throughout the whole story.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good one too.
Max and Julie are coming out of the movies. Again, this looks so funny to me because he's in like a trench coat and a little hat, and he looks
huge, just like the Thing trying to be a normal person.
It's very funny, and they're leaving the theater.
It's a trope of the ugly, any type of ugly character, like the Teenage Ninja Turtles. They always wear a trench coat. They still fucking burly as hell, but like.
You think the Teenage Ninja Turtles are ugly, Sly?
They're pretty
inside.
They're not conventionally attractive, Ryan. I'm sorry to burst your bubble.
Well, according to you, I mean, some people like Yiffing.
Don't judge Ryan's kink.
So they see Julie on a park bench and they go after her and they're like, "Hey, what's up? You want to go to the aquarium or something?" And then they get crashed into by a truck because, of course.
Wait, did you talk about their conversation when they leave the movie theater?
Yeah, I want to.
Oh, I like this so much. So they leave the movie and Max is basically complaining that like it's a super sexist movie because like this woman turns into a prostitute to get money from an old man, and he's like. Max is basically like, I don't know, I found that really sexist, and she's basically like,
he's not like, I don't know, he's like, that was a sexist fucking movie, like, he's very indignant, but
he's not even indignant, he just says it was sexist,
and she's like, look at this fucking snowflake over here.
Yeah, she's like, he's a fucking joke, get over it, like, why take everything so seriously? And it's kind of like the SJW argument, predated like 20 years.
So then, then there's they offer Sarah the ride to the aquarium.
Yeah, and they're going, and then they get crashed into by a car, and it's a bunch of carjackers and spotted underwear. And this is also funny too. We didn't mention this, but whatever the is are pretending to be people, even though they look like they look human. They always go meep. Like there's like a meep. And so, like, the carjackers are like, freeze, meep, sucker. And Max is just like, something's different. And then from his view, you see like a little. Like goo man with teeth wearing underwear,
holding up a revolver.
So he starts being a shit out of this, and as he fights them more, Sarah starts seeing them for what they are too, as black things.
And she actually, it was interesting because she liked the story of Jimmy beating up the carjackers, but in real life, she's like, this is actually like kind of sick to see people getting crushed.
Yeah,
this is
like
ugly.
That was a cool action story. This is just like I'm watching people's knees get destroyed and stuff, and I hate it.
Yeah.
Totally not in the version though, right, Darryl?
What?
Totally not in the version though. That violence is fucked up when you see it in real life.
What? I mean, say it again. Yeah, you were speaking too fast over your first.
It's because when he gets angry.
Sorry, never mind. Move on.
No, he's saying this isn't an
never
inversion.
Never mind. Fucking.
Because violence is not pretty in real life.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But it's not an inversion, right? It's not an inversion at all. It's fucking.
A subversion.
Yeah, you keep saying inversion.
It's because I accidentally said inversion when I meant subversion.
Yeah, I was like, I suppose this is I don't know, but the thing is, it's drawn cool. So just because the narrator's saying it isn't cool doesn't mean that it doesn't look cool. Like Max,
that's fair.
But it also emphasizes what she says. Like when somebody's fingers get broken, it zooms in on the fingers getting broken and shit.
But I would respect this as a subversion more if it just showed like her face reacting to it. But the fact that we still see these cool fight scenes.
and we don't care about these. That was the other weird thing is that the ises are like, they're so silly looking and goofy that when you see their faces getting like smashed in, you don't feel bad. You're not like, this is like really disgusting. You know, it makes me nauseous. It's like, look at that. Now he's all flat.
It is crazy how when they die, like one of them's dead in broken glass, and it's like, it's so weird that to have like this dark, like normally cartoon things don't die. They just like get beaten up.
Yeah.
But anyway, she pulls out a gun. Sarah doesn't.
Because
her dad's
this
gun.
is too much going on right now for her seeing.
Yeah,
Maxx
she's
and
like,
Liz.
none of this makes sense. Nobody's in charge. Adults run everything, and nothing works. I have no control, and I'm sick of running for myself. And she puts the gun to her head, and she says in narration, "This is the point of the story where I throw the gun away, or have this cathartic revelation that suicide's wrong."
Even
that
before
life's-
that, first she says like, "I'm my father's daughter. I'm gonna be just like him."
I am just like you, Daddy. I'm gonna see you, Daddy. And she says that's why this story doesn't work, because I just can't buy it. But she does drop the gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, she basically is saying like, "This is why the story of my life is shit, because like this is such a dumb cliche."
Yeah, like I'm supposed to do this, but this isn't a good story. One of the things that Julie actually said to her back when they were talking is like, a lot of the stuff that sucks now is going to change. Like, it seems like it won't when you're in it, but this stuff does go away. And again, it's reinforced here where Julie's like, things will change and you will change too. And she's like, right now, you wait.
The thing that I really like about this is throughout the story, Julie keeps telling her, "You just have to wait," and Sarah's like, "That's bullshit." And I remember being told that as a kid too, like, "Oh, it gets better, just deal with it." And like, that sucks. That doesn't make
Yeah, it's like
anybody feel
anytime
better.
you go through a breakup, it's like, it'll get better. It's like, but it's not good now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that I really like is the whole time Julie's like, "You just gotta wait. You just gotta wait. You just gotta wait for the pain to go away." And in the next scene, she's talking to Maxx, and Maxx says, "You just gotta wade through the nightmares." And she says, "You have to wait for the nightmares?" He goes, "No, you have to wade through them." And that like resonates with her. And I like that so much that like he's almost verbatim repeating Julie, but it's such a different way where it's like, it does suck and it's horrible, but you have to push through it.
The line he uses that, like, I really like this, and this is my favorite line from this, is that sometimes I think this whole growing up business is just pain management.
Yeah.
Which is pretty true when you have, like, a lot of scarring and difficult things that happen to you throughout your life. Is that it's like, it's not like that stuff changes, then you're like, oh, that doesn't mean anything anymore. It's that you get used to it and you understand it more to where it's not, like, bearing over your head the whole time.
Yeah, you basically just build a tolerance.
It's funny you like that line when Sarah says that's such a fucking dorky line to them.
Yeah.
No, but it works, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like my favorite line is the last one where Sarah says, "I never knew if Maxx knew my dad or not, but he knew me well enough to say he did." God, that sounds awkward. I'll never be a writer.
And that's my favorite line in the whole issue.
Mine too.
Yeah, I thought it was just such a great, and like they're having this conversation under the underpass. It's a really great scene, I thought.
This issue really stood out to me because like when I looked up later after I finished it, like Sam Keith and his stuff, I was kind of not surprised that he helped launch Sandman, because Sandman is filled with issues like this of just like one-off, let's take some character that's tangentially related to our main cast, throw them in this world, and like, you know, I'm not saying that this is exactly the same as Sandman, but it's kind of like, this is when I really was sold on the book, when I didn't have to follow Maxx the whole time.
But that's funny you say that. I want to say this right now. Sarah is the main character of this book.
Really?
Yeah, that's why I want to, because I wasn't sure how far we would get. I wanted to get to issue 4 because Sarah is the main character of this book, and as the book goes on, and this is why I always emphasize, don't judge a book by its cover, because Sam Keith made it basically the way it was to try to capitalize, get it up, because later on he tries to do an indie book and it failed. It flopped hard. He made a book called Friends of Maxx to try to try to do what he did later on in this book, where it tried to tell stories about regular people, but no one bought Friends of Maxx. People loved the Maxx.
Oh yeah.
And by the end of the Maxx, it stops being about the Maxx entirely. It's all about Sarah. The last 5 issues aren't related to the Maxx story whatsoever. They're really about random vignettes from other people.
It's really good you brought that up, because I was going to say my favorite part was like the least Maxx being a superhero kind of stuff there was, the more interesting it was. And I was like, why not write a book like that? And it's because it would have failed.
Yeah, and that's why like Phil, like when Phil said, "Oh, why is but judge by its cover? It's good," and I'm like, "But capitalism means you shouldn't," and this is why, because the books that are good don't always sell, and sometimes you have to sneak things in interesting ways, and that's why I think I can never really verbalize it, but I think these books help me verbalize it. This is why it taught me that lesson that the market, just because there's a market for a unique type of book, doesn't mean you can't sneak it in with interesting premises like this.
Well, actually, DC and a lot of the indie companies in the 90s did a lot of stuff like this, where, like, Sandman, the Justice League shows up in the first story, and then, like, it's totally separate from the DC universe and has no superheroics for 70 more issues. Like, I feel like a lot of, in this era, when, like, right around the boom, people were, like, tricking people into buying their good books by setting up a premise and then abandoning it by issue 3 or 4.
Yeah,
that's actually interesting. I bet we could do a whole episode on like things that are they present themselves as mindless, but there actually is not mindless, but they present themselves as like more marketable to casual audiences, but they do sneak in like deep themes and stuff in them.
Well, like our previous when we talked about Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, like Swamp Thing, Alan Moore was a horror character. No, Swamp Thing was like just like a Creature of the Black Lagoon kind of horror character, and Alan Moore made him a total force for social, critique.
Commentary.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
And, like, that's something that comics do all the time, because this book on its cover is something you would buy for 8-year-old Sly, because it's, like, this big guy punching bad guys. And then all of a sudden it tricks Sly into being a feminist.
Well, that's a really good line. It's because it's very true.
That should be on the episode blurb. We had a comic that made AO Sly think, oh, look, a 90s cool edge, and then it tricks Sly into being a feminist.
Yeah, but like
it's like Purple Hulk.
That's why I bought it. I was like, Purple Hulk, basically, with claws.
But like that's
sense.
something that I feel like comic books do more than anything because of the low budget to make, but the high mainstream appeal.
I can't think of a lot of movies that try and... Well, also movies aren't like serialized, where they're like, now we're gonna... Like, what if the next Star Wars movie is like, let's do a critique on Israel-Palestine situation? Like, that would just... It wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like comics...
It is too big budget.
There's so many comics, and then there's so many different characters. You can sometimes do this with certain franchises or new IPs, where you're like, this is Big Purple Hulk. Actually, it talks about feminism a lot.
Yeah, and it's less of a commitment because you can always cancel a comic book after six issues. It's without like losing that much more money. Where like a TV show, halfway through the season, people stop watching it, you cancel it, you're out a lot of money.
Yeah, you're on millions because you have millions of viewers.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yep.
Cool.
So final thoughts.
So would you continue reading the Maxx? Like, did you read the whole thing when you
I
were
read
a
the
kid?
whole series, yeah.
So obviously you don't have to answer this question.
Yeah.
Especially after I would have kept reading anyway, but especially after you said Sarah was the main character, I really want it. It's not just I want to continue the series.
I would for sure, and I haven't said that about many comics we've read. I think this one was just like weird enough to be like, because we have read good stuff, but for a lot of it I'm like, there's a lot of good stuff out there, but this is good in like a pretty unique way for me, where I'm like, I am kind of interested to see more of this. What
about you, Darryl?
My opinion on it increased since we've been talking about it. It's also hard because I didn't have a lot of time to digest it since I just read it today. Mm-hmm. So I went into it with like a lot of like, I was still torn on some stuff until we started discussing more of it. I'm like, oh, this wasn't the story, or oh, this was pointed out. Like the CPR dummy, I'm like, okay, that's a huge like weight off my shoulders that wasn't like he didn't just kill a person for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to know more about it. I'm also just really torn because I just don't like the art that much. Like the art isn't what's keeping me there. Mm. And I think for me, a lot of times the art is what, like, literally the art is what kept me through Death's Head.
Yeah.
Whereas I wouldn't have, I don't know.
I also want to apologize to Darryl for my, when we did Death's Head, we commented how Darryl, like, mostly was amused by the fact that we were trashing one of his childhood favorites.
Yeah.
And I got super salty.
So you apologize to him. I am that target like half of these episodes.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. You have to get yelled at by Sly sometimes too, Darryl. Okay.
Thanks. In an ideal world, maybe no one would get yelled at by Sly.
No, I think to make the podcast good, we all have to get yelled at by Sly.
No, it's understandable because, like, I think we pointed out last time, or maybe we talked off the podcast about this, is that because Death's Head's such low quality, I have no need to defend it because it's like, it is what it is. Whereas here, there are things you want to talk about where if you're like, I believe this subverts it in this manner, you want to defend it from that. Whereas, like, you guys are like, the time traveling stuff doesn't make sense in Death's Head. I'm like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I also think one of the things that's important that I'm kind of glad that you feel this way, Darryl, is because one thing that's hard as comic book fans is there are books that I love the art and hate the writing, or I love the writing and hate the art. And like when we've done 2 episodes on Cry for Justice. I love that artist, but I'm not going to tell somebody go read this book. And like if you're having a hard time following the art, and especially I think you more than any of us are drawn to the art than more so than the writing, that like even if you really like the themes, if you're not having a good time reading it, then why would you continue, you know?
Yeah.
And that's one thing where like I guess it's you could say that like with movies, if you like the script but you don't like the actors, like it's hard.
And people get like that with video games too. They're like, PS1 game might be great, but I just can't stand the graphics, so I can't play.
Or like visuals are a factor in the art.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, you know, if we didn't care, if the art didn't matter, we'd be a novel podcast.
Yeah. Novel issues.
Novel graphics?
Check out our site, novel-graphics.com.
Buy my book, Anselai's book.
So, are we good?
I'm cool.
I believe so.
So, I want to do a quick plug for the Comrade Radio Network. If you guys missed Tales from the Static, which you should have because it was great, they came back on it's just Ryan, but Ryan came back on Sunday with the
wait, you're Ryan,
a different Ryan. This is B Ryan. He
that's his name, Brian.
No,
Brian,
guys,
Brian who? All right, sorry.
I'm A Ryan. He's B Ryan. Whatever. Anyway, Tales from the Static started season 2 on Sunday, so check that out and check out all the other shows on ComradeRadio.com. And iTunes and Stitcher, and while you're there, write us a review and join our Facebook group, Oops, I Talk Divisive Issues. And everyone should be happy because I deleted all the bots and stopped letting them in.
Oh, God. We got so many all of a sudden. Did you guys notice that?
Yeah, that happens with you. I did on Twitter, like I invited a bot to my follow the bot, and every bot just started following me.
But our group is now safe again. No bots.
I feel like Twitter is real easy to know who's the bot because their like @handle is just a bunch of characters.
Yeah.
Also, we should say like these bots aren't like stealing your financial information or anything. It's like, what are they really gonna do besides like
steal your financial information?
Well, that's Equifax.
Well, that's only because we have a weekly "What's your credit card number" thread in the Facebook group.
And Social Security. That's my favorite thread.
Yeah.
Don't forget to take a photo of a CVC number too.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, the group is safe and lots of fun, and everyone should join it. And it's just
if you want to send us your credit card information, by the way, it's what's our email?
divisiveissues@gmail.com.
Here, I'll give you my address so you can come here yourself.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
Thank you all for listening. I've been an inverted superhero.
I've been victim blaming, but not really. I'm crying inside.
I've been a carjacker in my underwear, but actually a little black gloob with teeth.
And I've been gone. Mr. Gone, I guess.
Stay in continuity.